Okay, welcome everybody. It looks like some people are having trouble seeing Slido. When we get to the first one, I'll make sure that shows up. You may have to go to the buttons in the corner, in the bottom left-hand corner, and tell it to pop up. So, welcome everyone. We're going to be talking about effective daily stand-ups today. And as we talk through it, you'll see why. One of the things we want to talk about is why I prefer to rename these. Oh, look, it's me and me. That's kind of weird. Okay. I usually like to refer to it as the or effective daily face-to-face meetings, and we'll talk about why that might be and see if that resonates with you guys as well. First, we're going to start off. We're going to watch a cartoon, about a 3-minute cartoon, just talking about a little bit of things around daily stand-up meetings, why they might be called that, why we might call them something else, and what our goal is with them.
One of the most common practices you'll see in an Agile team is the daily stand-up meeting. Typically, this is a 15-minute meeting where everyone gets together to make sure everyone knows what has been done since the last meeting and what everyone plans to do before the next meeting. To keep the meetings short and focused, most teams conduct them standing up. There are a lot of teams who have what they call a daily stand-up that don't get much value out of the meetings. If your team is doing a daily stand-up because you've heard it's the way to be agile, you probably need to spend some time discussing why you're actually doing those meetings. Agile doesn't say anything about having a daily stand-up meeting. Teams that don't know what Agile values and principles are behind a particular practice are unlikely to really get the full benefit out of those practices. So why do teams do these daily meetings? What is the principle behind the practice? Consider this Agile principle. The most effective and efficient method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. A short daily in-person meeting is a very effective way of making sure that the entire team has at least one opportunity each day to talk face-to-face. I like to see teams call these meetings the daily face-to-face meeting because it keeps people focused on the principle behind the meeting rather than the physical position of the attendees. When teams don't realize that they are trying to follow the principle of face-to-face communication, they end up doing all kinds of weird things that often defeat the purpose of the meetings. For example, I worked with one team where people would call into a conference line for the daily stand-up meeting every day and then walk into the team room 2 minutes after the meeting completed, put on their headphones so no one could talk to them, and start on writing code. They were so focused on the practice of having a 15-minute meeting that they entirely missed the principle behind the practice. As a result, they removed the very thing that Agile said was valuable, face-to-face communication. Needless to say, this team was doing a lot of other stuff that sounded like a highly functional Agile team. On the surface, they had a lot of practices you'd find in an Agile team, but once you started digging into things, it was apparent that much of what was being done ran contrary to the Agile principles and values. They weren't reaching anywhere near their full potential because there was no foundation beneath their practices. Now, the reality is that many teams are distributed. Some people may not be able to fly across the world every day for a 15-minute face-to-face meeting. Teams that are trying to follow the principle of face-to-face communication will tend toward using video conferencing for their daily meetings because it's the next best way to communicate. When you're driven by Agile principles, you can easily evolve your practices to deal with new conditions and changes. If you want to really develop software efficiently using Agile, you have to make sure that everyone knows the principles behind each practice, and nowhere is this more true than your daily face-to-face meetings. Do you have an interesting story about a daily stand-up meeting? If so, please leave it in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, please take a moment to like it, subscribe, and share it with people on your team.
Okay, so hopefully that was some useful information. We'll be going into a little bit more depth. This particular cartoon you can find at youtube.com/markshed. So some teams have found that's a pretty useful way to have conversations, to watch the videos. There's a bunch of cartoons, maybe 3-4 minutes long. A lot of people have said it was helpful to show them sometimes at their daily stand-up, just get people thinking about things and to launch a conversation. Okay, so go to Slido. It should be under a panel under apps. If for some reason you can't see it, you can also just go to slido.com and type in that number there. I'm just curious, what do you call your daily meeting? You call it the daily stand-up, the daily scrum, daily face-to-face. We got 3% of us call it the daily airing of grievances, so that's another option. Some usually people aren't explicit that they call it that, but sometimes I've seen it when that's just call it the daily. Okay, that's a good way to do it too. So it looks like most of us are calling it the daily stand-up, but like I mentioned in the video, I think that kind of puts the focus on the position of our bodies more than what we're actually trying to accomplish. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if we call it something that really focuses on what we're trying to accomplish, maybe in some small ways that helps us focus on the principle behind what we're trying to do. Okay, so most of us call it daily stand-up. 1% people call it daily airing of grievances, so that's good to know. I'm glad I put that option on there. I think it's interesting that no one calls it the daily face-to-face. Got 0%. So evidently we don't have people here that I've worked with extensively on their team, or we've regressed or something. Okay, next question is, what's the biggest pain point of your daily meeting? Whatever you call it. What is the biggest pain point that you run into? Are you able to see it through your browser? Yes. Okay, good. That's odd. Sorry about that. Okay, time limitations. People staying on topic. The limited problem is it's daily. Short on time. Long status type updates. Late arrivals. Talking to Scrum Master instead of each other. Breaking people of the habit of status updates. Distraction from the real pain point. Status report just same as yesterday. It evolves to a status meeting. Cross geography team participants, differences in time zone. Yeah, I've felt that before. Starting late, no clear message about blocker, takes too long, tardiness time, people not being able to walk the wall. They usually think it's about the 3 questions. Okay, we'll talk about that. Coming late, involving Scrum Master, back-to-back meetings causing late starts. Discrepancy of stand-up should be between business side and devs, getting people just to show up. Okay, so lots of pain points around this. And I would love to say that what we're going to talk about is going to just make all the pain points go away. And it probably isn't. But maybe we can give you some ideas, some things to try that maybe will make it just a little bit better. Some ways to get kind of the team on board with doing things that will help you get more value out of your daily stand-up, daily face-to-face, daily scrum. Okay, so usually called the daily scrum. So I've got usually I've done my my polls at the end of the competitive quiz at the end of things, but I'm going to just throw them here in the middle and ask you questions even before I tell you what the answer is. So we'll have think of it more of like a trivia game maybe. So we've got this thing called daily scrum. Oh, and this is what you're competing to win: a copy of my book. If you're in the U.S., I will mail it to you. If you're somewhere else, we'll find some way to work it out with you. But this is my book, Starting Agile, tries to focus on why we do different things more so than you have to do X, Y, and Z, but why would a team have a daily stand-up? Why would a team have a board with all their work on it and stuff? Anyway, I will send you the winner of this, the kind of trivia we throw through here in questions. Will win a copy of that book. Okay, so first question. So go to Slido. If you don't have it, you can click on the app to bring it up, or go to slido.com and type in the number. And here is our first question. Okay, so this will let everybody join. And I encourage you to participate. And part of the reason is the more interactive we make this, it's not even a matter of whether you get the question right or not. Hopefully we make it fun by giving stuff away. But there's a lot to, if you're able to interact with stuff more, it usually has more of an impact on what you're able to take away from it. So I encourage you to join and participate, just because that will make this time more valuable to you. And hopefully that's what you're here for. Okay, give it 2 more seconds. And if for some reason you join late, you can still join late on this too, but you have your best chance of winning the book if you get in early. Okay, give 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. And the first question is, what is a scrum in Ruby? Is it how the owners plan the game? Is it like a timeout, but people throw things at the players? It starts the play like a kickoff or jump ball. It's how the teams plan before starting a play, or it involves running around pretending to fly on a broom. And okay, we got almost a tie here between it starts the play like kickoff or jump ball, or is how teams plan before starting a play. So interestingly, this is kind of how we use it in thinking of our daily meeting, but it actually is where they get together and how they like a kickoff. It's not actually like a huddle where they things out. And the running around pretending to fly on a broom is cribbage, something like that, from the book series Harry Potter. They actually run around on brooms and try to play the game that's described in the book. Anyway, but yes, it starts the play. It's like a kickoff or jump ball. So if that's what we're meaning it as, the idea is to get us all start the day, kick everything off and get us going, or is what it is in Scrum. And there's a leaderboard. Okay, so there's everybody position. So this is a picture of a scrum. So they all get in this position, and I think if I understand correctly, they throw the ball in the center and they start out doing that. So like they're not all around here trying to figure out what their play is going to be. This is like where it actually gets kicked off. So I don't know a whole bunch about rugby. I had to look this up and find a picture of it. Okay, so daily scrum versus a daily stand-up. The name for a lot of people, the name daily stand-up may be what it looks like. Most of us were using that name. That's cool. So let's talk about daily stand-up. Now, I would actually suggest that instead of calling it daily stand-up, that if we call it daily face-to-face, we may keep us focused more on what the point is of what we're trying to do. So what is the point of having some type of daily meeting? Well, if we're following Agile, where should we look? Maybe we should look at the Agile manifestos and look at the Agile values and principles. And if we look there, so here's a list of all the principles. So this isn't one of the competitive ones, but go ahead and vote for which principle. It should give you the list of them. Which principle do you think best supports the idea of having some type of daily meeting? And there's not a right or wrong answer here. I would say some are more right than others. So which principle, probably, and there's multiple principles here that kind of lend toward, we can follow this principle. Having a daily meeting of some type helps push us toward, helps us follow the principle. It looks like most of us are saying the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. So that's one I usually think of as being a really, really important one. But the second one here, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Getting everybody together at least once a day to touch base face-to-face, make sure we're headed in the right direction, make sure the priorities are still what they were from the day before, and make sure if there's any communication that hasn't been able to happen, it happens. Those are all really, really good reasons to have some type of daily meeting. And these others are good too, right? If we want to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, we need to have some type of the more we interact with them, the better, or their representatives or the business side of things. So many reasons here that could support it. But the point I want to make, though, is the reason we're having this meeting is something we can go back and look at the Agile Manifesto and the Agile principles and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And if we lose sight of that, you end up doing all kinds of really strange things in your daily meeting that do not help you achieve anything when it comes to actually trying to satisfy the customer and delivering software. So the Agile principles say that the best way to communicate is face-to-face, which is why I like calling it the daily face-to-face meeting, because it keeps us focused on that. In fact, I have found that sometimes if you go to somebody's stand-up, so whatever their stand-up meeting is or face-to-face meeting is that they have every day, you can tell a lot about the team just from those 15 minutes or however long it takes. Because if they're doing things in a way that look like it support the Agile principles, they're probably doing a lot of things in the way they work in other areas that are supporting the Agile principles. If they're doing their daily face-to-face meeting in a way that goes against the Agile principles or seems to ignore them or not realize what they're pointing them to, it's probably likely that a lot of their work is ignoring the Agile principles. So here is that's kind of a little bit hard to see, isn't it? Okay, so this is from a writer. So if you're bringing in a big rock band or big concert act to your city, they give you pages and pages of everything that has to happen. And some of it is the food and stuff that has to be in the green room for the performers. This is from a band in the 80s. And I'm going to give you a chance to guess what it is in just a second. And now notice what they were wanting: potato chips, nuts, pretzels, M&Ms. Warning, absolutely no brown ones. So question for you is, first of all, do you know what band this is? Oh, whoops, did I not have that on there? Okay. Oh, yes, this is it. Okay. And actually, so get ready to guess. So that, let me show it to you again. So this is a photocopy. I need to find some way to make that show up a little bit better. But the photocopy of the things that they had to have. I like this all 48 large bath size cloth towels. Um, but no brown M&Ms. So get ready. And who had no brown M&Ms on their concert rider? Was it Taylor Swift, the Monkees, Van Halen, Aerosmith, or Bon Jovi? And I think this story has probably been told about most large bands from the 80s. But there's one of here when I looked it up, the one that I found that said they actually had this. And good job. It was actually Van Halen is the group that when I was looking into this that said that they were the ones that had actually done this. Well, why were they doing this? Well, the reason is because they found that if people didn't read the rider, really, really bad things happened. Like I think they were in one situation where they had not read through the weight of the stage they were bringing in with them, and so everything sank down into the floor. So they threw this thing in here about the M&Ms, and the idea was that if we go in and there's brown M&Ms, then we know that we're probably going to have problems in lots of other places. And this is what happens when I look at a team that's, if I come in and they're doing their face-to-face meeting and they're not actually driven by the agile principles, and it doesn't look like I mean, particularly like if they're all calling into it instead of trying to get to where they can see each other, that's kind of an indication that there may be other principles that they're missing as well. Okay, there's our leaderboard. We've got Chris in the top spot, followed by Ian, Shane, Happy Camper, and Preston Claypool. So daily meetings where people can't communicate face-to-face are like finding the brown M&Ms for Van Halen. They point out that there may be something we may not be paying sufficient attention to the agile principles. So what do we hope to achieve? We're having this daily meeting. What do we hope to have come out of it? And I would say probably the big thing we're going to have is communication, right? We're having a meeting. We're getting everybody together. Communication should be happening. If we all just went into a blank, empty room and talked about what we were doing and then left, we wouldn't be achieving communication. But the reason we're all going to be set aside this time is to have communication. Well, what do we get from communication? And hopefully what we're going to get from communication is more efficient work. Now notice we want efficient work here. We're not looking for efficient status reports. So if we look at all of, like we've got our work here, we've got all these things, just a visualization, we've got all this work over here that needs to be done. And our goal is to get it to, we want to get it to production, right? So we need to do something in our daily face-to-face meeting, have communication that helps enable getting from this to this, right? Over here where it's deployed and making the customers happy. That's a goal of what we're trying to achieve. Now, let me show you something here. Okay, there's the URL for what I'm going to pull up here. Let me make sure I can get it. Where'd it go? So I want to show you this traffic simulation. Sorry, I had this up and then I shut everything on my computer to make sure there wasn't anything causing problems. Okay, so let me bring this up here. Okay, so this is a traffic simulation. And what I wanted to show you with this, let me take it down to 2 lanes here. So we've got all this traffic going around, and I can do things here like change the density and a bunch of different things, and we're going to do that. So if work is represented by putting things around here, going around the circle, we might come into this. So let's say this is the work on our board, and we can see we're working about 2,800 vehicles per hour, 2,500 vehicles per hour or so. Hey, thanks for putting that up there, Jake. And I can slow it down and I can go down here. Now I've got no vehicles. Tell you what, we'll make it to where these vehicles can go as fast as they can. So there's no limit on how fast. Okay, we're going to accelerate really fast too. Okay, so I can put in, whoops, didn't mean to do that. I can put just a few cars here and look how fast they're going. Okay, so we've got these cars going around. So that's our work, being done. It represents that. So one thing we could try to do here is like, oh, that's great. If we could just put more cars in here, let's look how much work we can get done. So we're going to take it up here. Now notice what happens to our flow. We've gone from about 3,900 vehicles per hour, and now we're down to about 2,500, 1,800. And there's lots of things we can play with here. I like this right here. We can decide how polite the cars are. So if we make them really, really polite, let's see what happens. Make them even more polite. Does that speed them up or slow them down? Okay, so it looks like they're polite. Maybe they go just a little bit faster depending on what you're looking at. But what's happening here is as we add more things that are happening at the same time, we haven't actually sped anything up. So if I bring this back down here, let's see what happens. We've gone from being like 1,800 to now we're doing 2,500 and 3,200-ish, depending on where you are, and it varies a little bit. But I can take this down, and the way that I actually speed this up from when it's really, really full is reduce the number of things I'm working on at one time. Now, I can also do other stuff here. If I'm like, well, it really does need to be faster. Yes, if you get it, the more you put there, they spend all the time avoiding each other instead of actually traveling. And I can also come in here and I can say, okay, we're going to add more space for them, and that's going to speed up even more. And my point with this is I like this visualization because it really helps kind of illustrate what happens when you focus on doing more things at the same time instead of focusing on how to actually finish stuff. Okay, so let's go back here. Whoops, accidentally started over. Okay, jump. So you've got that link there, and so that may be a useful thing for your team with what we're going to be talking about on how we manage our work. Okay, so let's take a brief pause here. I want to just talk about one other thing while I've got everybody's attention. I sent out links to this. This is a class that I'm offering. It's a 5-week class where we're going to be going through these 5 business books, looking at summaries. And we're going to spend an hour a week. Go through the summary of the book and then really mine the book for the strategies and things that relate to agile teams. So we're going to be trying to take the tips and things mentioned in these books and see how we would apply it within the context of agile for our teams. So this is going to be a fun thing. I've got I'm looking forward to it. I think we've got about 7, 8, or maybe was 7, 8. I think about 7 or 8 people signed up. So the first time I'm doing it, I'm not hoping to have hundreds of people in it. So it'll be a smaller group. This time through it is probably going to be the most hands-on and stuff. So if that sounds interesting, you might want to look at this. Matter of fact, let me put the link. I got the link here. Anyway, there is here is some information about it. And this particular link right here for the next few days gets you $100 off on it. So if that sounds interesting, go ahead and do that. And even if you're not interested in the class, but the idea sounds kind of cool, here is a link to one of this will get you on a list to get more information about it, but it also gets you a free viewing of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is really, really useful for teams that are trying to follow Agile. So if you fill out that second one that says 5 dysfunctions of a team, that'll get you access to the summary of that, which is about 12 minutes long, and I think it's very, very useful. Even if you've read the book before, I find it useful as a way to review. And if you do join this class, you'll get access to a year to 300 of these summaries of different business books and stuff. And the idea behind this, what I'm trying to accomplish with it, is I think there's lots of great information in these books that we can use for our Agile teams. But if you're like me, most of us probably don't have time to spend the 14 hours to read every single book to try to figure out what's useful and what's not. So with these 5 books that I've found to be very, very useful, we're going to try to get all the information, but just spending an hour a week over five weeks, but get the key things that help us move forward. The other thing that this is really, really good for is if you are interacting with the business, one of the best ways to be more efficient as an Agile team trying to deliver software is developing a good vocabulary and good relationship with the business side of things. These are the types of books that a lot of people that are very focused on business are going to be reading. And the more you're able to kind of assimilate that, the language around it and have a better understanding of the way that they're thinking about things and being able to draw on examples that they've heard from other things that they're reading, the more you're going to be able to collaborate and move your team forward. So anyway, this is coming up. If that sounds interesting, if you have any questions about it, reach out. I'd love to talk to you about it. But that's going to be coming up in February for anyone that's interested. And that first, did I get the first link there? Leadership is dead. Although I have not seen that one. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. So that first link has the Agile LNL 99. That gets you $100 off of it, and that should be live for another 5 days. So check that out if you're interested. Okay, back to our main programming. So 3 questions. This is what a lot of teams do when they're trying to have their daily face-to-face meeting. They ask themselves, what did you do yesterday? What will you do today? And do you have any impediments? This can be very, very useful. It's not, and this is what I believe the Scrum book I've got suggests doing that. However, it can be very, very useful, but let's imagine a scenario. Let's say you're having your daily meeting and you're going through and you're asking everybody these 3 questions, and 7.5 minutes, halfway through the amount of time you wanted to spend on it, the fire alarm goes off. Fire alarm goes off and everybody has to leave, right? And leave the building, and they end up coming back, not to the stand-up because that meeting's over, to their other meetings and other things that they're working on. If that were to happen, how happy would you be? Like, what would you have covered all the things that you actually needed? So, okay, I guess I said it got cut short at 5 minutes. How likely is it that you would have come up with a plan for your most important work? So on one hand over here is very, very likely that the stuff you talked about was the most important things you could talk about, or very, very unlikely, number 1, of saying, no, we probably what was discussed in that first 5 minutes did not benefit anyone at all in any way. So it looks like our average score is around 2.4. Okay, so it looks like most of us are saying that if we lost 2/3 of our daily stand-up, assuming everybody's shooting for 15 minutes, if we lost 2/3 of it, we would not feel like we had done the most important thing with that period of time. So 3 questions can be very useful, but oftentimes it's just a way to make sure people are busy. And I know I've been in daily stand-up meetings, daily face-to-face meetings before, where I'm like, oh no, what did I do yesterday? I know I was busy, I know I was doing it, but I've got to make sure I say something that it sounds very, very impressive to the rest of the team. On one hand, maybe there is some good in that for if you've got people that wouldn't actually do anything in the day other than they need to be able to say something in the meeting, but those probably aren't the people that you're trying to stock your team with anyway. But it's often a way just to make sure that people are busy, and sometimes that comes at the expense of actually delivering what we're wanting to deliver. So how could the daily face-to-face meeting prioritize the most important thing? And probably by using a story-based daily face-to-face meeting. So if this is our storyboard, we've got something like this, and you probably heard the adage to stop starting and start finishing, which is kind of one of the things I wanted to show with that traffic circle. Although it was going a circle, I guess it would have been better showing it just going across. But our goal is to get things through the system, not just start more things, not just add more cars to it. So if we were looking at this green line here points at something that is in testing and is about ready to be done. Over here, the blue line points at something that's in requirements. It has the most work of anything that we've started on the board, is that one that the blue line is pointing to. So which story can we get a return on investment from the soonest? Well, this one over here has gone through, it's all the way through to testing. Let's see, are we through with testing? Okay, yeah, we're to testing. We just need to test it and then we can say it's done. If this story was valuable to do, we can start earning a return on investment from this one way before we can do the one over in requirements, because we haven't even done the requirements work through the requirements stage for that yet. So if we were to start here, we can get things done. We can start getting return on investment much, much sooner. So instead of going around and asking people, what everybody did, the most important thing we can do today is try to deliver something valuable for the customer. And the story that we can do that, have the most chance of actually delivering today, is probably this story over here that just needs to be tested and then moved to done, then we can give it to the customer. Another way I like to kind of think about it is, let's say you're in a shoe store. I don't know why I chose shoe store, probably just because I had a good picture of a shoe. You're in a shoe store, and you own a shoe store. So you've got customers in all these different places, right? You've got some customers that are outside your store. They're not even in the store. They're just walking by, maybe looking at something in the window. You've got some that are just inside the door. You've got some that are shopping, and you've got some that are at the checkout, and some that have checked out and are leaving or finding other things. So not all of these customers represent different potential return on investment to you. Some of them represent a return on investment if you go and spend the 2 minutes and check them out. It would be silly to go ahead and say, so, we can get money from these over here sooner. We get a return on investment. But what if the people in the store, instead of checking anyone out, they go outside and spend their time trying to get people to come in, to put more people in the store? Well, that would be silly. You've got these customers here that are trying to give you money. You can get a return on investment from them. They've already gone through all these other stages. And if we go and deal with people outside the store at the expense of the ones that are trying to check out, they may get frustrated and just leave, even though they're the ones that are there, money in hand, ready to pay. The ones that are just inside the door maybe have stepped in because they didn't like the weather or getting ready to step back out. The ones that are shopping may not end up finding anything that they want. Now, it doesn't mean that we aren't going to help the people that are shopping or check with the people inside the door and see what they're doing. But if we do it at the expense of the thing that can be delivered right away, we're probably more likely to put ourselves out of business than if we start there and say, okay, let's deal with the people at the checkout counter first. A game like playing with my kids called Overcook. I don't know if you play this, but you're running around in a kitchen and you've got different stages to get things through and then get it through to the customer. And one of the things that was interesting is when we were playing it as a game is you kind of see this happening, right? Because you're running out of time. And if I focus so much on trying to prepare more food that I don't actually deliver the stuff that's ready to deliver, our scores are a lot lower because we end up at the end of the time frame, so the end of the sprint, end of the day or whatever, and we've got all this stuff that we haven't actually realized the value for. You don't get paid for it until you actually give it to the customer. So if you play this game with your kids or yourself or whatever, we play this game, think about that. Like, where do you get the most value? So why is this really hard? So what I've just described, the idea of sitting and going across the board like that, is very simple conceptually. But it's often really hard for us to focus on the thing that will deliver the value the soonest. And I think one of the reasons is because oftentimes our code isn't going to immediately benefit the customer. And the longer our cycle time between when we start working on something and tell the customer we're working on it and we actually give it to the customer, the easier it is to not focus on that thing that's going to give us the return on investment the soonest. If I'm working with a customer and we're turning things around in like 2 or 3 days, doing software for them, it's a lot easier to prioritize getting things done and into their hands than if things are taking 2 months. Because if it's taking 2 months, it's not something that's in our mind of, oh, I could benefit from that tomorrow. And that's where DevOps and automation, continuous integration, and all those things of trying to make that flow smoothly and quickly become really, really valuable, because it changes the way that we approach, okay, I'm getting off on a totally different talk here, but it changes the way that we approach just the delivery of value. Okay, next question here. Get ready. Oh, we got 92 people. Ready, set, go. Okay, what did Mark say is an advantage of a story-based face-to-face over a person-based face-to-face? Is it because introverts don't have to speak? Because it focuses the team on how to collaborate to deliver the next item? It requires fewer donuts, or it will confuse corporate spies? And yes, it focuses the team on how to collaborate to deliver the next item. Who is getting value from the meeting? So one thing, in a lot of Scrum Masters I've talked to, when they talk about their daily stand-up, one of the things I hear a lot is people just aren't engaged. So why aren't people engaged? And often the question becomes, how do we convince them that this meeting is valuable? And I'd like to suggest that's probably the wrong question, because if you shouldn't need to convince them that the meeting is valuable. And we ought to start with is, how do we make sure that it actually is valuable to them? Because if they're getting value from it, a lot of this stuff takes care of itself. So we need to try to fix this first. I was working with a team, and we had people from the like system engineers that ran things, and while we were deploying this, and this is a project for the Treasury, while we were doing it, going through the deploy process, setting up the servers and things like that, we asked them to come to our daily stand up so we could have conversations and make sure we were all on the same page. And so deployed, I think we were 5 years of going through everything, and they joined, I think, like a year in. And then after we had gone live, I wasn't sure if they'd still stick around. Matter of fact, I figured they'd probably say, "Oh, it's up and running. I won't come to these meetings anymore." But like 2 years later, I went back and I asked, and I found out they were still attending these stand-ups. The system engineers were coming to stand. They weren't necessarily, no one was making them to. They had just been asked to, and they were still coming to it. And I reached out to one of them. I said, "Hey, this is great. You're still participating in this." And he said, "Oh, I wouldn't miss this at all." It's like, this is the most productive 15 minutes of my day, is getting together with you guys and actually talking through what we need to do. It's like, we don't do that on any of the other teams, and it takes so long to get anything done. It's like, this is, of all the time I spend in the day, this is my most productive time, because we get in here and we figure stuff out. That's what you want to do, right? That's the type of, and if people don't feel that, maybe you've got somebody just with a bad attitude, but chances are there's something they're not getting from it. Chances are if we change what they're able to get out of it, it will start being valuable to them. So it's not just a status update. And this is what happens when you get a bunch of people together and they're just giving status updates, and I don't care about what the person said before me, and I don't care about what the person's saying after me. That makes the meeting worthless to me, because I'm just telling somebody something in the room. I don't know if you remember, Ryan Latta was talking about what he did as a Scrum Master, and if he felt people were talking to him, he'd just turn his back on them and look somewhere else, so they'd have to talk to each other, or just sit down, or just leave the room, like while they're in the middle of doing stuff, just to make it really clear that this is for them. They're not talking to him as the Scrum Master. They're supposed to be coordinating with each other. So teams should value coordinating. If you... And here's the question to ask yourself and ask your team is, do you have a team or just a collection of individuals? If you just have a collection of individuals that come together and tell each other what they're working on that no one cares about, yes, of course they're not going to get much out of the meeting. No one cares. If you've got a team that's actually working and collaborating together, that time can be very, very valuable to them. But it may mean, if you're not getting value out of your daily face-to-face meeting, it could be that you're not actually collaborating. So maybe doing something like mob programming or pair programming or something like that would start making it to where there's more value in this coordination. So is the team collaboratively delivering the best return on investment, or are all the individuals just working their lists of tasks? Yes, this is streaming. This will be on the YouTube thing as soon as we're done. So these are very, very different experience, right? The team collaboratively delivering the best return on investment, or individuals just working on their list of tasks. So when we were talking about walking the board, starting over on the thing you're most able to deliver and saying, okay, as a team, what can we do today to try to get that story across the line? You have to collaborate to have that type of conversation. If we just look at that story and say, oh, Bob's working on that story. Good luck, Bob. Okay, who's working on the next story? That's not collaborating, and that's not taking advantage of trying to deliver things to delight the customer as rapidly as possible across the board. If you start with what can we deliver today, and how can we rearrange our work in order to have the best chance of delivering that today, and then once we've got a plan for that, go to the next one, we may find that there's some stories we don't even get to and talk about. But that's okay, because if we don't get to them, it means that all of our time was focused on the things that we think are actually more valuable. So that focus, though, is focused on a collaboratively delivering value rather than just people completing their tasks. And one of the things that impedes this sometimes is when the team's very focused on which tickets I said teams. When you've got a group of individuals where everyone is just focused on which ticket did I complete, and do I get credit for it? And I may not want to work on a ticket with someone else because their name's on it, and then I won't get credit for it. If the way people are tracking and managing their work encourages people to think like that, do something different. Find another way to work. And that's one of the reasons I don't like assigning people to the tickets on the stories on the board, because I don't I don't want people to feel that this is my story and not your story, or that is Tim's story and not my story. I want everybody to be looking at how do we get these stories across collaboratively, because we win or lose as a team, not just, oh, he didn't do his story, or she didn't do her story, or she finished hers, so she's doing really well, and I didn't finish mine because I was helping her. That could have been, it's the collaboration of finishing the stories as a team. So if you see some of that stuff coming up where people are thinking in terms of what did I accomplish and am I getting credit for it, it might be because of the way you're even just representing your work on the board. Face-to-face for change management. So if we think of shifting left, so think of change management processes, and let's talk about how you could shift left by being at the daily face-to-face meeting. So here's an example of what you've probably seen in a lot of cases. You get all the way through to testing, and then you've got to wait 2 weeks for a security review meeting before you can go live with it. I've been lots of places that work like this, although that 2 weeks was actually kind of this shorter. Sometimes it would be a month or some large period of time before they actually review and say, okay, now you can deploy it. So a group I was working with had a setup like this, and it was very, very painful. So what we did is we went to the security person and said, hey, why don't you join our daily stand-up? Join our daily face-to-face meeting. And when we say we're getting ready to start something, if you have any questions, just ask about it while we're working on it. And then we can take the stuff that you were going to tell us afterwards that we had to then go back and rewrite all of our stuff to do. We'll know about it ahead of time, and it won't take as long. And also, you're not going to be just blind going into it, because you're going to hear what we're doing as we talk. If we have questions, you'll be there to discuss it. So what would happen is he'd ask some questions up front, and maybe even the business would decide the business may even decide, hey, this story sounds like from a security standpoint, it's going to be a lot harder. I'm going to, instead of doing that, we're going to choose to do this other thing because it has fewer security implications and it has a better return on investment because there's not as much security overhead related to it. So they do that, and we'd work through. And then in development, the security officer was right there once a day, and he could hear what they were saying and say, hey, yeah, we think we're going to need to add 3 more roles to get this to work. And he might say, oh, wait a minute. If we add new roles, that's going to cause this, this, and this. Are we sure we want to do that? And that's fine, but we just need to talk through that. And it was happening as we were doing the development work. So when we get over here, by the time we were ready to go live, security knew everything was good and can approve it. They might look at something, but it wasn't, usually it was a 30-second thing where they would say, yep, I approve this because I understand everything that went into it. I understand the security implications. We've talked through them. This is good, ready to go to production. So that was an example of how the daily face-to-face meeting was able to really increase the collaboration in something that had been very much a throw it over the wall silo to security people and let them work on it for 2 weeks. It made it much more secure because he knew what was going on, and it made things work a lot faster. But that's not how a lot of organizations actually do their security reviews. Okay, so it's time for your daily face-to-face meeting, but the Scrum Master hasn't arrived. What happens? So how would you describe what your team will do here? So everybody's in the room except for the Scrum Master. What happens? The thing I've seen happen before is everyone starts remembering back to their college days and says, wait, does the Scrum Master have a master's degree or PhD or neither? And how long do you wait for each level? And then hopefully by the time they figure that out, the Scrum Master has shown up. Okay, it looks like most of us are saying that the team will just pick someone to run the meeting. Well, that's awesome. If teams are doing that, usually or oftentimes, that's a sign that at least someone feels it's valuable enough to go ahead and try to make the meeting happen. Team meeting just runs itself. To me, that's even better. If people just start going through things and it's not even like, oh, we need to assign you to do this, but everyone sees it as valuable, so they just know what to do, and it just happens. It's not bad to have somebody specified for if someone isn't there. Product owner running the meeting isn't necessarily bad. But this down here, if the team's just waiting for the Scrum Master to arrive, it's probably an indication that they think that they're doing it for the Scrum Master instead of doing it for each other. What you really want to do is whatever happens in the scenario, it should be driven by the idea that people are seeing that this is valuable, so they're going to go ahead and do it because it's valuable to them. Let's see. Sure. So I saw somebody Hang on, I check the comments. I saw some good things popping up here. I think I heard somebody saying that there's some type of rotation. You're trying to create a shared ownership. So here's an idea for a shared ownership. I've been on teams that what we did is a random team member runs the meeting. So we had something that would put into a chat like 5 minutes before the stand-up was supposed to start. It would randomly select 3 names. And so the idea was the person at the top would do it. If they weren't there, it was the second person. If they weren't there, it was the third person. So every day it was just a random person who was responsible for, making sure everybody's ready to go and and walking the board. And they would start on the right-hand side of the board, work their way down, and it went pretty fast. And this team was often spending 5-7 minutes to walk through stuff. They were getting it down to a science, but they were getting a lot of collaboration out of it. And part of what was driving that collaboration is the fact that there was random team members running it. Since it was a random team member running it, it really helped emphasize the idea that this is for the team and by the team and for the team. It's not something that the Scrum Master was doing because they needed an update. It was something that was helping the team be more efficient. I got into that program and fiddled around with it and set it to where one person was coming up the same every single day. So I think it took about 5 or 6 days before he realized that he was getting selected every time, and then went and looked at the code and realized we were just messing with him. But that's fun to do too if you got a random generator like that. Shared responsibility. So we're wanting the team to see it as a shared responsibility. Well, responsibility for what? What are they supposed to be responsible for? Is it because we want them to be responsible for finishing development work, for getting code working in QA, for getting code running in production, or delighting the customer with new functionality? Now, all of these things are good, right? It's not like we shouldn't be doing any of these things, but I would say this is really what we want to have happen here. This is what we want the team to be focused on, is delighting the customer with new functionality. If we're working on stuff, finishing development work, getting it working in QA, and getting it run in production, but it's not something the customer wants, we're wasting our time. The stand-up should help the team delight the customer with new functionality. And the reason the stand-up does, the thing the stand-up should be letting us do in this aspect is the collaboration between the team, but also with the customer or whoever's representing the customer on the team to make sure we're working on the right things that will actually delight them. So like I said, these are all good things to have happen, but we really want the team to be thinking in terms of responsibility for delighting the customer with new functionality. Okay, so a few things to avoid. So using the face-to-face meeting to give the Scrum Master an update. That is not a good situation. If no one will run the meeting if the Scrum Master isn't there, that's probably an indication that they're trying to give an update to the Scrum Master. If you're in a situation where everybody's just looking at the Scrum Master, that's probably an indication they're doing it as an update. If everybody's seeing it as, I need to show the Scrum Master that I was busy yesterday and will be busy today, that's not a good sign. You want the team actually collaborating around how do we work together. And so it should be not just lines pointing from each individual to the Scrum Master, but it should be a mess of people talking different directions and how they're coordinating. And a lot of times what comes out of it is, oh, you're doing that? I think I did something like that yesterday. Let's talk after the stand-up. Oftentimes the daily face-to-face meeting is coordinating the conversations that need to happen to make sure people are able to work as efficiently as possible. Another thing to avoid, waiting until the daily meeting to ask a question from another team member. I was working with one team, and the main thing I was working with them was just on their daily face-to-face meetings. So I was there, and I was like, okay, where's this story at? And somebody said, oh, I need to ask, I was waiting to ask Bob this question that I ran into yesterday. I was going to ask him at the daily face-to-face meeting. I was like, when did you run into this problem? He's like, right after yesterday's face-to-face meeting. So he had a question, and his plan was, okay, well, next daily face-to-face meeting in 24 hours, I'll ask Bob this question, even though Bob was right down the hall from him. So if that type of stuff is happening, the team is not using the meeting to collaborate better. They're using the meeting to delay things. Fortunately, it doesn't happen a lot, but I have seen that happen before. Using daily meeting to avoid deep collaboration, only giving good news at the meeting. And if the meeting becomes something where you feel like you're giving good or bad news, it should be more facts. If you're collaborating on the level where you need to be, there shouldn't actually be like, oh, that was good news, or that was, I guess maybe there'll be some good news and bad news. But if you're in a situation where you feel like you can't say what's going on, that's a sign that your meeting probably is not fulfilling its purpose. Or Ignoring opportunities to provide a better return on investment for the customer. The most effective daily face-to-face meetings I've seen are when, and this should be happening while the team's working as well, but where there's conversations like, hey, business owner, this thing that we said was going to be really easy, turns out it's going to take a lot longer because we've got to get certificates installed and things that we didn't realize. Should we talk about if this is still the next most important thing to happen? Those are types of conversations that should be at least being launched from the daily face-to-face if they're not, even if they're not fully taking place in the daily face-to-face meeting. Okay, so let's ask some questions now. Remember, you're competing for a copy of my book. It's a nice hardback book that I will send you. Okay, question. What did Mark say was like Van Halen finding brown M&Ms in their green room? Scrum meetings where people ride brooms, teams that select too many stories, daily stand-ups that aren't face-to-face, managers being present in the daily stand-up meeting. What did I say was like Van Halen finding brown M&Ms in their green room? And yes, daily stand-ups that aren't face-to-face, because if they're not face-to-face, then there's probably a lot of things that aren't actually trying to follow the Agile principles. Now, teams selecting too many stories probably is a bad sign as well. But the thing I was mentioning was just the face-to-face is kind of like a litmus test in some ways for how much are people paying attention to the other principles. Okay, we've got Preston at the top, followed by Happy Camper, Heather, Shane, and DFox. What did Mark say was the most important shared responsibility that the daily stand-up should enable? Finishing code, deploying to QA, delighting the customer with new functionality, or deploying to production? And I see somebody says their team doesn't want to turn their camera on to be face-to-face. And I've been on teams that people just don't want to do that. And if we don't want to do that, are there possibly 100 other areas where the application of the Agile principles, we just don't want to do that as well? And so I think it comes down to, do we really believe that Agile is a good way to develop software? And if we don't, then go do something else, right? If we don't think the principles matter, let's go do something else that's different than using the principles if we think that will get us better results. But if it's just a matter of, oh, I'm not going to do this because I just don't want to, even though I think it probably is the best way for us to actually deliver software, there's some deeper problems there, right? And I understand some of there's culture things that go around with this and stuff. One team I was on, I've got these shirts that say, we believe in face-to-face communication, turn your video on. And we sent those to everybody to help encourage people to be on video. But I'm recognizing it is a hard thing, but it might indicate that there's a bunch of other areas as well that there's room for improvement. Okay, Happy Camper falls into the top spot, followed by Preston, Heather, DFox, and Shane. Next question. If people aren't engaged in the daily face-to-face meeting, what should you do? Should you put them on a performance improvement plan? Bring donuts if in person, or just eat a donut on camera if remote? Convince them the meeting is valuable, or fix the meetings to make them more valuable? If people aren't engaged, what should you do first? And yes, fix the meetings to make them valuable. And the point I wanted to call out here between the convince them the meeting is valuable is, if people aren't seeing it as valuable, the first thing we should do is try to make it more valuable. Because assuming most people are rational, like I said, you may have some things that no matter how valuable it is, the person just doesn't like meetings and isn't going to say it's valuable. But you can get most of your people to see it as being valuable if it's actually doing things that are valuable to them, particularly in helping with collaboration. Okay, so congratulations, Happy Camper. You took the top spot, followed by Preston, DFox, Heather, and Shane. So Happy Camper, if you want to take a screenshot, or just tell me, I guess I don't have your name, so take a screenshot. If you can, send it to me and let me know your address, and I will get a book headed your way. So very good. Hopefully that was useful. I will, let's see, and I'm be sending you a copy of my book here. So watch for that in the mail after you send me your information. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Let me check and see. Let's see. I had something up that I think did Q&A stuff. Let's see if that actually came up for anybody. Okay, so somebody asked, how are we doing on time here? Okay, good. We got a few minutes. So there's a Q&A on the Slido thing, so that's what I'm looking at here. Question is, the Scrum is a means of restarting play after stoppage, which has been caused by a minor infringement of the laws. Scrum. Oh, okay. So, and when it comes to the way that rugby works, that's interesting. Nowadays, the Scrum is often held virtually, like my team has it on M. So on Monday, I guess. So I don't think daily face-to-face meeting is not fitting that. So I don't think. So that's a good point. So when I say face-to-face, I want to be able to see people's face, right? If I can be in the same room with them, that's great. If I can't, we've got teams that are remote all the time. I still want to be able to see their face. My kids do a lot of tutoring for other high school students, and one thing that we found is uh, if they're using their camera to show their work, like working on math, the tutor is at a huge disadvantage if they can't actually see what the student's expression is on their face. Because you can see if they're, even if they're doing the right stuff, but they look totally confused, you know you need to dig into it more. They can also be not doing the right things, but then you look and they're like off, paying attention to something else. Well, then that's what you need to address, maybe more than whether or not they remember how to do a particular algorithm or something. And yes, you can't hear your colleagues rolling their eyes. That's a good point. Okay, any other thoughts, questions, aggravations?